afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Glenorchy Planning Authority on Monday, 18th of March 2024. I'm Beck Thomas, Mayor of Glenorchy and Chairperson of this afternoon's Planning Authority meeting, and I start by acknowledging that we meet today on the land of the Muwinina people. I acknowledge that whilst the Muwinina people sadly did not survive colonisation, we recognise Tasmania's Aboriginal people as the traditional owners and continuing custodians of this island, the Tawita, Tasmania, and pay respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here in our city of Glenorchy and in Tasmania. Joining me in the council chambers this afternoon are my fellow Planning Authority members, Alderman Stephen King, Alderman Jan Dunsby, Councillor Harry Quick and Alderman Russell Yaxley. We have apologies this afternoon from Alderman Josh Cockshut. Also joining is our planning staff. Thank you for joining us, and other staff relevant to tonight's agenda. And welcome to members of the public joining us both here in chambers and online this afternoon. Agenda item 1 is Planning Authority Declaration. So I declare that the Glenorchy Planning Authority intends to act as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993. The Planning Authority has full power to make planning decisions on behalf of the Council. Next slide, please. Oh, it's a bit slow, is it? Our meeting procedures this afternoon are fairly simple. Our planning officer will present their assessment and their recommendation to the Planning Authority and then answer any questions Planning Authority members may have. I will then invite the applicant and any interested parties to have their say by addressing the meeting, and speakers will be limited to 5 minutes. I may then ask the Planning Officer to comment on any matters raised by the applicant or any other representatives. The Planning Authority will then discuss the application, and for statutory planning applications, the Planning Authority will decide the application and our Senior Statutory Planner will explain appeal rights, and we don't have any planning scheme amendments this afternoon, so we'll skip that one. Legal requirements. When deciding an application, the authority is required by law to seek to further the sustainable development objectives of the Act, to consider representations received during the public notification period, and to make the decision by reference to current planning scheme provisions. Our meeting rules, again, fairly simple. We just ask that people please comply with any directions given by myself as chairperson and respect everyone's views and their right to have a say. Item 2 is apologies, leave of absence. As I mentioned, we have apologies from Alderman Josh Cockshut this afternoon. Item 3 is pecuniary interest. Do any Planning Authority members or staff have any pecuniary interest to declare this afternoon? None. Item 4 is confirmation of minutes. Do I have someone to move that the minutes of the Planning Authority meeting held on 13th of December be confirmed? Moved Alderman Yaxley. Someone to second. Alderman Dunsby. Any discussion of the minutes? Alderman Yaxley. No. Any discussion? I will put the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand if you're for. It's carried unanimously. Agenda item 5, proposed use and development spa and sauna tourist operation with associated infrastructure at 134 Fairy Glen Road, Collinsvale, and Flora's Cottage, 146 Fairy Glen Road, Collinsvale. And our planning officer is Sylvia. We'll give this to us. So over to you, Sylvia.
Thank you, Mayor. So the first 2 slides, they show the location of the subject property. So the property is towards the end of Fairy Glen Road, about 24 kilometres out of Collinsvale. You note that the property is dissected by various easements. So the easement for the road is going through it, and there's also a watercourse going through it. The creek that runs through the actual property is Myrtle Creek, and then there's another creek at the bottom of the property, that's Sorrel Creek. So the application is for sauna and spa to be located on this residential property that's got an existing single dwelling on it. You can see on the picture on the right hand side the red roof of the existing house. There is also some historic pickers huts on the property, so the property is actually heritage listed. The sauna and the spa are to go where the location marker is on the actual slide. So they're on the opposite side of where the residence is, on the eastern side of the property. And yeah, the picture just shows you the whole layout of the property. The application also includes 146 Ferry Glen Road. That's the property next door. The only reason that property is included is there's a building. Yeah, it's a bit hard to pinpoint on the map where it exactly is. That is going to be used. It's not going to be a new building. The existing building is going to be used to garage a minibus that's going to be used in association with this use. And the access of it and part of the building are over the property boundary. That's why the next door neighbour's property is included, but it's not affected in any other way. Go next slide, please. So put some arrows where the proposed development is going to go. You can see the fence in the right-hand picture, sort of on the right-hand side. That's where the house is. So on the opposite side of that fence, that's where it's proposed to have the sauna and the spa. That will be built into the embankment. There's an embankment there, which we'll see in the next few slides. It's next to a creek. And but this is the road that's going through the property, and there's also a bridge further down that's over Myrtle Creek. Next slide, please. So this is sort of more of the location. It's quite difficult to show it all in pictures of where it's going to be. So from the fence that's opposite side of the road is sort of going further down the bank from there. But the creek's actually more, if you look on the left-hand picture, is more over where it's, there's a bare patch, and then it's going to be quite heavy vegetated again. So the creek is more sort of down there. That will be the Sorrel Creek that would run there. The next slide, please. This shows the building where the minibus would be parked, and the house that you see on that picture is the next door neighbour's house at 146 Ferry Glen Road. On the left-hand side, again, we've got the better picture. This is more sort of the way I understand it, the proposed location of the sauna and the spa. You see a bunch of trees in the middle there, and they will be coming down to make way for the proposed development. There'll be 5 wattle trees that are proposed to be taken down.
Excuse me, Sylvia, that carport you're saying is where we park?
That carport?
Yeah.
Next slide, please. This is just showing the zoning. So the property is located within the rural zone. That's and is surrounded by the landscape and conservation zone in green. The next slide, please. So this is a picture of the architectural plans. So where the red circle is, they are the proposed buildings. So it's proposed to have 4 buildings. They would house change rooms and amenities, a multi-purpose room and an office. They're sort of grouped in pairs, and there will be a spa that's outside on a deck area. There will be a retaining wall along the embankment and also a landscaped area. But they're relatively small buildings, which you will see. But this shows it well in proportion where the house is. Again, here you can see a close-up of the floor plans of the buildings, and there will be a spa outside. So the road will be up. So these are the buildings. So at the ones where the elevation, that sort of shows the windows. That's where they're looking out, the windows looking out onto Sorrel Creek and that vegetated area there. The other 2 elevations are one from each direction. So you can see they put the car up there where the road is. So they're built into the embankment. So there's not a lot of excavation. There's minimal excavation because the buildings will be partially supported by poles and they're sort of dug into the hillside. Next slide, please. So this is a list of the discretions under the Tasmanian Planning Scheme, which the proposal's got to comply with. The first 3 discretions are in relation to the use. I'll get into them bit more detail in a minute. Then we have a discretion in terms of the boundary setback and one car parking space, and then there's 3 discretions that relate to the natural areas overlay. The next one. Yes, this one shows, maybe I should go through, I can deal with the setback now if we like. So normally 5 metre setback is required. So this proposal has got less than 5 metres on the bottom boundary and on the boundary up where the road is. In terms of where the neighbouring property is, that will be on the top right-hand side on that plan. The proposal complies, so there's only setback discretions in terms of the road setback and the setback on the rear boundary. So the setback on the road is just over 4 metres and the other setback is just short of 4 metres. So it's not a big discretion, and it's considered that there wouldn't be any adverse impact on the neighbouring properties because it complies with the setback in regards to that. Also in terms of any visual impact, they sort of sit below the road, so there wouldn't be any high visibility of the proposed buildings. Actually, while we've got this picture as well, I should explain as part of the proposal, there's also a service trench proposed from the main house to the building number 7. It's that red line that you can see there, if an angle. It's proposed to run an electricity cable through that, and that's also part of the application. On the next slide, sorry. Okay, that's the Natural Assets Code. Okay, I'll go through that as well. So the Natural Assets Code applies to the subject land. So because it's close to watercourse, there's watercourse protection, but also there's priority vegetation in the hatched area, and the watercourse layer is sort of the blue area shown on the plan. The applicant put in a natural values assessment, and that was also looked at by our environment officer. In terms of the vegetation that's being removed, there would be 5 wattle trees, and they're within a vegetation group. I understand it's eucalyptus regions, wet forest vegetation, and it's understood that that is not a vegetation community with high conservation value. So it was found acceptable that those trees will be removed. The other thing that's looked at under the Natural Assets Code is whether or not the proposal would affect water quality. There'll be a new pipe being built for the stormwater to go to the creek, and that was looked at as well. Any works that would have to that will be done would any bare ground would have to be revegetated, and also sediment fences will be required to ensure that water quality would not be adversely affected by the proposal. But if that were done, then it will be satisfactory, the performance criteria in terms of the Natural Assets Code and the Water Protection Code. The next one, I probably need to go. This actually shows the vegetation that will be removed. This photo, I've taken that out of the Natural Values report, and that shows quite well the vegetation sort of in the middle where the cross is proposed to be removed. So this shows the site quite well where it will be going. So it's considered that the performance criteria under the Natural Values Code will be satisfied as part of this proposal because no threatened vegetation will be affected and the water quality will be not adversely affected by the proposal. What's the next one? Yes, the application is heritage listed. There's no considerations for us because it's listed with the Tasmanian Heritage Council, and it was referred to the Tasmanian Heritage Council. They would, in theory, consent to a discretionary permit being granted, so there's no heritage grants that will cause a problem. I think I need to get back to the main discretions, which are really in terms of the use. This use is classified as tourist operation, and so the use is discretionary, and there's three different discretions that relate to that discretionary development. So I just go through. Okay, so the use in clause 20.3.1 P1, the use clause, looks at a use that's discretionary, excluding residential use, must require rural location for operational reasons, having regard to the nature and the scale and the intensity of the use, the importance or significance of the proposed use for the local community, whether the use supports an existing agriculture use, and whether the use requires close proximity to infrastructure and natural resources, whether the use requires separation from other uses to minimise impacts. It's considered that the use would be satisfying these performance criteria. The applicant asserts that the location will be required for operational reasons because it's in a natural setting, so the use would rely on natural resources for this particular location. It may have some benefit for the local community in terms of the economy. It doesn't support an existing agriculture use, but it would not impact either on any agriculture use. It doesn't require separation from other uses to minimise impacts. That's usually for uses that make a lot of noise and dust, which this one isn't. But having also regards in terms of the nature and the scale and the intensity of the use, it's a relatively small development. It will be located in an area that's not being used for any agriculture use, which is obviously the main purpose of the rule zone, is to protect agriculture land. And so it was considered that the use would satisfy this performance criteria. Then the next one is also for discretionary use, clause 20.3.1, and that's more in terms of not impacting on adjoining properties that have an agriculture use. With respect to this performance criteria, it's considered that the proposed use would not confine or restrain any existing use on adjoining properties. The location of the proposed use is well away from adjoining private properties so as not to have any adverse impact. Also, the proposed buildings are relatively small and mostly obscured by trees, so that there would not be any significant visual impact. The proposed use would be small in scale and would not create noise and pollution that could affect neighbours. It's not expected that the proposed use would generate any off-site impacts. I mean, the main use is probably more than residential amenity, that it wouldn't impact on agriculture activities on neighbouring properties, which the nearest one with agriculture activity is quite some distance away from that proposed use. So it's not considered that there'd be any adverse impact on that.
Sylvia, I'm just sorry to interrupt you. We do have your report is extremely comprehensive, and we certainly, all planning authority members have read your report. So perhaps if you could just, in the interest of getting through the meeting, just summarise really succinctly any key things you have to add to what you've written in terms of their discretion. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I did want to go through the last one a bit more because, again, the last performance criteria is all in terms of agriculture activity and how it impacts on that. But really the main clause on that one is whether or not the local road network will be capable of accommodating the traffic that will be associated with the use. And that's the main issue of this application. But we'll discuss that in more details after I'm finished with my presentation, and Emily will talk about that. So, okay, so then we'll just go straight to then we finish with the discretion, so we'll go straight through the representations, and they were all in support of the application. In particular, they were very happy that the applicant consulted with all the residents in the area, and also a lot of them were saying because the bus was being used, there will be less generation of traffic. So I think the last slide is that the recommendations. So overall, the use is considered would normally be okay in that setting because of its size and where it is. However, there is a problem with the local road, with the existing road that's there, and so the application cannot demonstrate that it will comply with the performance criteria that in relation to the capacity of the local road network and cannot accommodate the traffic generated by the use. And for that reason, the application is recommended for refusal. But as I said earlier, Emily is going to be talking to this because it's quite it requires an expert to talk about the road capacity. So thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for summing that up, and thank you for your very comprehensive comments on the discretions within the report too. Emily.
Thank you, Sylvia. If you could go to my slides, please. So as Sylvia mentioned, the application is for tourist operation, which is discretionary in a rural zone, and the discretionary is stated as it must be appropriate for a rural location having regard to the capacity of the local road network to accommodate the traffic generated by the use. Traffic is both pedestrians and vehicles. I'll try and keep my presentation short so we get to it. As you can see, the first slide sort of shows what Sylvia demonstrated with where things are located. The first picture on the right is just heading towards the bridge, and you can see the bridge in the background, and where the ute is located is where the minibus would potentially drop off and pick up people, with the shed just behind where that minibus would be parked. If you go to the next slide, please. So under that discretionary, we need to make sure that the capacity of the road network can accommodate the pedestrians. The pedestrians will arrive to site via a minibus. There will be 4 sessions a day, so that's 8 times a day pedestrians will be walking on the road. The minibus will park on the southern side. So if you look at the picture on the right-hand side, that's where the minibus will park, and people walk from there across the bridge and then onto an access path to the site. As you can see, it is a gravel road with no footpath or protection for pedestrians. There are 3 residential properties located on the south side of that bridge, so that's about 27 vehicle movements per day going over that bridge currently, and then you'll have the minibus as well. My concern with the pedestrian traffic, as I said beforehand, is they'll be on the gravel road, and there's also potentially a risk that a car may not see a vehicle as well and stop in time. However, my main probably concern is the road getting there. The applicant has addressed this by putting on the minibus, but it is my view that the capacity of the local road network is still not suitable to accommodate that increase. Could you go to the next slide? So this is sort of the standard of the current road as it stands. We have recently put a 5-tonne load limit on that road with a sign above saying it's a narrow road not suitable for sort of large buses and vehicles as well. Then as you drive along the road, there are no passing areas until change 570, so 570 metres. Just prior to that, at about 500 metres, there is a slip that we're waiting to occur. You can see the longitudinal cracks in the road. So we put up lots of guideposts so cars don't sort of go onto the edge, and also signage as well. In that first 500 metre section, and that's the third picture along, you can see that there's quite a drop-off there. the road width in that section is between 3.2 and 3.5 metres, and then about a half a metre verge, although we're not quite sure how stable that verge area is. Then as you drive along the road from that 550 metre section, then the roads and the geometry sort of flattens out as well, as you can see by the picture, the far right picture there as well. The road width sort of is between sort of 3.2 to 4 metres with between 0 and 1.5 metre verge area there as well. Now, there is some guidance on what a rural road should be, which is the ARB, the Australian Road Research Board, which says that in a rural location such as this, the road width should be sort of 3 metres with 1.5 metre shoulders either side. So that's a carriageway width of total of 4 metres. Fairy Glen Road doesn't have any shoulders. And then the ARB guidance is also then for 1 metre verge on both sides. So your whole formation width of the road is 6 metres. ARB also recommends that there's passing bays every 300 metres and visible from each other. As I mentioned before, in that first 550 metre section, there are no passing bays there. Next slide, please. So I went out to site and walked it, and at every 100 metres we measured what the sight lines were like along there, and also measured where the passing bays are. So the sight lines are the ones in yellow, and the passing bays are located in blue along there. As you can sort of see, as you get past that slip area, you get some more passing bays as well as the terrain sort of flattens out a little bit. It's also worth noting that the residential properties are all sort of past that 800 metre mark as well. So all the residential properties are past that section of main concern, which is that 550 metres inwards. Now, as I said beforehand, my main concern is that first section there where there's no passing bays. We also looked at sight lines as well, and they should be around 60 metres. They're not met in some sections, but that's further along the road in around, I think, the 800, just past the 800 metre mark and the 900 mark, but that's not so much of a concern because of the low speed of the road, and the road width widens out there as well, and there are passing opportunities through that area as well. So the current traffic on the road is between 70 to 80 vehicles per day. That road services 8 residential properties, and most of those residential properties are beyond that 800 metre change. The proposed development will increase that by 8 vehicles per day, so that's 8 movements in, 8 movements out, and it's planned to use a minibus, which is will assist because the driver of that will be familiar with the road. Now, the TAA view is that the existing road can broadly satisfy the road design requirements with some localised squeeze points identified, and recommends that signage is proposed to overcome these, along with the use of the minibus. Within the first 550 metre section, the road width is approximately 4 metres, thus it is possible to cut 2 cars to pass at low speed. My view is that within that first 550 metres, the road width is actually 3.5, and due to the steep embankment alongside the road, that verge area shouldn't be used. The road currently meets the reasonable capacity for the residents that use it. The road does not have the capacity to accommodate the increase in traffic due to the development, and it will increase the risk of an accident or the possibility to have to upgrade that road. Go to the next slide. So back to, I suppose, the discretion, because this is in a rural location, and the discretion is that the use needs to be appropriate for the rural location. And to me, that discretion has been put in there because it is a rural area that needs to be assessed to make sure that the capacity of the local network can accommodate what this tourist operation is proposing. And I'm recommending refusal on a few grounds, being the pedestrians walking on the road and the road not meeting the requirements for passing by sight lane, road widths and a barrier fence on the bridge. But the main reason is because there's no passing opportunity in that first 500 metre section of the road.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just writing notes. Yes. Thank you very much, Emily. Do any planning authority members have any questions for Emily or Sylvia at this point? Alderman King.
Just one, Emily, I couldn't quite see how many passing bays were you suggesting there would be appropriate for this to be acceptable?
Potentially between 1 and 2.
Just two?
Between 1 or 2, it needs to still be assessed.
Between 1 or 2 is 1.5, so it'd be 1 or 2.
1 or 2.
Yeah, 1 or 2, yeah. Package jumped in.
Oh, Patrick, did you have a comment in response to that?
No, I didn't. I'm just here in case needed for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Yaxley.
Yeah, so I've got a number of questions. Just wanted to clarify the road authority in the report. Who is that referring to, just to clarify?
So that, Patrick, is what I would term my manager, the road authority, because he looks not after myself as the traffic engineer, but the assets as well and the reconstruction of roads.
Yeah, okay,
So
great.
broadly speaking, the road authority is council under the Act. That's right.
Yep, no, that's right. I just wanted to get that clarified. And so no representations that were against, all were for?
Correct.
Regarding the electricity access, I think from memory in the report it talks about that the applicant would have to enter into a deed of agreement on Part 5. Is the applicant comfortable and happy to be doing that if it proceeds, as far as you know?
Yes, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, yep. And again, same type of question for the parking for the bus. There's obviously some upgrades that need to happen, and that will all happen as part of the agreement.
With the cable or the
parking for the bus.
Yeah, yes, the minibus parking. We just need to see some further details.
Yeah, and that will form all part of the application. Okay, that's right. Just regarding the TIA, the transport impact assessment, who arranges that?
The applicant.
The applicant does. And so, do we know what is it an experienced business? Is it are there a number of people who go and do it, or?
Yes, so you have to be a qualified person to do that, and it's an independent assessment.
Yep. And I guess the purpose of the TIA in terms of the applicant, what's the purpose of it?
Is to assess the application.
Yeah.
In line with the planning scheme and as well as the impact that application would have on the road network.
Yeah. Okay.
Independent.
Yep. So I've got a number of questions there. So the assessment mentions that the movement of pedestrians is a very low risk activity for the location. It says the mention to add in pedestrian signs to reduce even further. The report states that under normal conditions, stopping is acceptable, but our report that we have says that the risk is a vehicle may not stop or hit a pedestrian. And I would assume that's on every road. So I guess the TI states that it's a very low risk. I guess why do we differ, and what's the evidence that we have to make that difference?
Yes, it is a low risk, but it's a risk that because there's no formal footpath or crossing, it's just signage that would go in to alert drivers that there are pedestrians.
And it talks about the addition of a maximum of 8 vehicle movements. That the TIA says that there's no significant impact on the operation or the efficiency of the road. I assume that would be continue. Why do we disagree with that?
Because my view is the capacity of the road network in that, mainly that first section where there are no passing bays, the road network is not able to accommodate that extra increase in vehicle movement.
Yeah, and I guess what evidence are we basing that on?
So that's the ARB, the Australian Road Research Board, have a manual for rural unsealed roads, and they recommend that there's passing bays every 300 metres, and that they can be seen from each other now, and that's what I'm basing that on.
Yeah. And do we have any ability to restrict, I guess, in the future, let's just say post if this was approved, or to ensure that it remains as a minibus access, or is it?
That would be a
that
condition
could
on the
change.
permit. That would be a condition on the permit.
Yeah. Okay. The TIA, I guess I'm going on about that because that's the evidence that I have before me. And I guess it states that if we consider it that the road is unsafe, and effectively that's what we're saying that we're refusing the application for, that's what's recommended, that basically the council must act to make it safe. Are we in a position to be actioning that, and is it in budget type scenarios for that to happen? Because that's a concern, the report stating that.
Yeah. So just to clarify, I'll perhaps ask Emily to clarify this. My understanding is that's the view of the independent traffic impact assessment that has been provided by the applicant.
Yep.
Council's planning and traffic engineer takes a different view, that the road is in its current form is safe for the existing use and capacity that it is currently taking.
Yep.
And so just clarify, is that the case, Emily?
Yep, that is correct.
Yep.
There's two competing views here. And I guess it's up to our judgment as to which one we are accepting as the
I just find it
view.
that we're asking for a report. It costs money, it costs time and experience, and I guess I'm finding it difficult to understand why we wouldn't take that on board as part of the bigger picture of it. That's my concern. So I've asked a number of questions, so I'll leave it open to other questions as well.
No, I think it's a valid question, and I guess under the development application process, the reality of it is that we as a planning authority and using the resources within council, because we have those resources within council, we don't get our own independent assessment because we have the resource within council, whereas some other planning authorities may not have those.
Yep.
So I guess it's trying to get a balanced view both from the applicant's perspective and getting the second opinion. And in this case, it comes from our office because we have the experience and the knowledge and the expertise within council to also provide that view.
Yep.
But so I guess we're getting the two different views. It's up to us to make the judgment call on whose advice we accept as a planning authority. Noting that we take a view as within our local expertise and knowledge we have within council, whereas the view coming from the applicant is a view that is an independent assessment funded by the applicant. And I do believe that the traffic impact assessment, someone representing the traffic impact assessment provider is online, so we can perhaps ask them. I'm not sure if they're willing to answer any questions we may have. Keith, is that you online?
Yes, it is. I'm perfectly happy to answer any questions if necessary.
That's great. Thank you. Is that a fair summary, Emily, of how the process works in terms of traffic impact assessments and council's assessment as a planning authority versus an independent assessment?
Yes.
Alderman Dunsby.
I just had a question around traffic movements. Now, you've mentioned that using the minibus will be part of the recommendations. There's nothing to preclude people attending that property in another vehicle if they need to, I'm assuming. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And there may be people that can't access the minibus that may need to go and want to use the facility and things like that, would need to make their own way, their own transport. And there could be a lot of different reasons why people would be. So that would see potentially further people using that driveway and or using that passing lane and access that won't be covered under this application. So do we preclude people from doing that? Is that something we can or can't do? Just want to get an understanding of that,
So
please.
there would be a condition on the permit that patrons must only use the minibus to get to and from the site, and it would be up to the applicant to manage that.
So I was going to ask the same sort of question. What if somebody misses the bus and say, I still want to go? They drive up there. You know, we've got no control over that, and neither does the operator, really. I mean, if somebody 5 minutes late and missed the bus, well, I'm going to go anyway. I want this great experience. What happens then?
Then they would be in breach of their planning permit.
But they can't control somebody driving up there, so it just creates extra traffic. That's what I'm getting at, potentially.
Further to that question, may I ask, in terms of using a minibus, I applaud the applicant for, I guess, trying to come up with solutions to avoid additional traffic on the road through the use of a minibus, but I do note Council has endorsed recommendations in a report that was provided as an attachment back in 2022, I think it was, where we have put a 5-tonne load limit on the road. We have made some investment to improve the road to the standard that it is now. In terms of a minibus actually frequenting that road, is that a concern to you as well, Emily, in terms of actually a minibus on that road regularly?
Well, it would be under the 5-tonne load limit, and it would, I imagine it would be slightly bigger than your normal car, but not that much bigger than a normal car.
But in terms of the actual capacity on the road,
yeah, what's the increase in traffic volume?
yes, is the concern. And I guess further to Alderman Yaxley's comment and question about the traffic impact assessment and the conclusions that makes, I note the traffic impact assessment provided by Minson says that on this basis it should be safe to assume the function of the road will continue to be satisfactory for road users. Then it goes on to say, if council considers the existing use of the road to be substandard or unsafe for normal use, then it is the responsibility of council as the road authority to take actions to overcome issues, irrespective of the proposed development. And that's a pretty loaded, I guess, assumption. And I just want to be clear that it is not council's view that we consider the existing use of the road to be substandard or unsafe for normal use with the current loading that it's taking.
Correct.
So that's correct. So that's certainly not the case, although the traffic impact assessment seems to assert that we do consider it unsafe or substandard for normal use, but actually that's not the case. Your concern is that adding another 10% of volume to that road through the proposed development is of concern.
Yes, correct.
And would require upgrades to the road to be able to meet that increase in capacity.
Correct.
But not at our cost, is what we're saying.
So that's another question I had, was the traffic impact assessment. Council requested further information in relation to compliance with standards, and the information I have in the report says the traffic impact assessment provided some basic recommendations to overcome issues identified, and in brackets it says road widening signage and advisory speed signage. So I wondered if maybe, Keith, you were able to talk to that in terms of the recommendations to overcome the issues identified, particularly in terms of road widening, because I think that's one of the key concerns that our traffic engineer has outlined, is that particularly in that first 550 metres, that not having passing bays is an issue. So I just wondered if you were able to talk to that, particularly what you were seeing as the recommendations in terms of road widening and who was proposed to fund that.
Thank you. I guess that both my assessment and council's assessment are fairly well aligned in the sense that both agree that there are passing opportunities along the majority of the length of the road, but the initial part of the road is quite narrow, and that's a section 550 or so metres that doesn't have a passing bay and is quite narrow. So I guess the difference of opinion lies in the fact that if a strict application of the standards say that you need a passing bay every 300 metres, in this case, we've got just less than 600 metres, so we should really have a passing bay in there to make that clause of the standards applicable to the nature of the traffic that we've got on this road. I would suggest that it's almost impossible to achieve that given the topography of the slope. So we've got an existing situation that's very difficult to deal with, whether that's paid for by a multi-million development or a road authority such as council. It's a very difficult thing to achieve, to install a passing bay on a section of road that's on that topography. So I think it's an existing scenario that is very difficult to correct. So the only way you can overcome that is to acknowledge that there is a shortcoming, and that's to have enough warning signs there to alert motorists that there is an issue. Then it comes down to the amount of traffic that's using the road. So at the moment, we've got around 80 vehicles per day, and that's related mostly to the residential dwellings that are along the length of road. In the peak period, so in a 1 hour period, we'd be looking at less than 8 vehicles per hour, probably more like 6 vehicles per hour. So typically one house would generate about 0.8 vehicles in the peak hour when it's averaged out. So that works out to be about 6 vehicles an hour. Some are going outwards and some are going inwards. So the risk of 2 cars passing on that narrow section is very, very low. It's a very small risk. So I disagree that we're at capacity simply because we don't provide a passing bay there. I think capacity needs to be looked at much more mathematically. It needs to be examined more carefully in the sense that the capacity really relates to the ability for vehicles to use that road. So capacity of an intersection is easy to understand because it's the ability for vehicles in the side road that gives way to absorb into the main traffic. So we can all understand that principle. In this case, we have a section of road that can only accommodate one vehicle at a time, or one direction of traffic at any one time. And in the morning peak, it's mostly vehicles heading outbound, and in the afternoon peak, it's mostly vehicles inbound. This development only generates 1 minivan an hour, either coming in or going out. So it really, and in the peak hour with the 6 vehicles an hour, outside of peak periods, it's much less than that. It may be no vehicles per hour. I, in fact, walked the entire length of this road with the proponent, and we didn't see a single car in that time. So it really is a very low volume road, and I don't believe that we're at capacity simply because we don't provide a passing bay. So I think that's the main issue of disagreement between council and my assessment. The issue of the pedestrians, I think one thing that's been missed in the council assessment is that my report recommends a traffic management plan for the safe movement of pedestrians from the minibus to the site. This is a very standard procedure. The best one I can think of that's has similarities to this development is what was done for Bruny Island Cruises on Bruny Island before they developed their new facility. They had 40 pedestrians walking between the ticket booking to the jetty along a section of road very similar to this, although it did permit two-way traffic normally. And that was done very safely and effectively using appropriate traffic management. So in this case, we've got very, very low traffic volumes and appropriate traffic management is it's what's regularly used for this kind of thing. So I guess it's unusual in the sense it's a very remote location with very low traffic volumes, a very specific requirement for pedestrians to walk on, and very little traffic operating under very low speeds. So in my opinion, that can be done safely if we have the right traffic management in place. In terms of the construction, there was mention of the traffic associated with construction. As it was stated at the beginning of this agenda item, these are very small buildings, so it would be similar or on par with the construction of a normal residential dwelling. So we're not talking about cranes and large trucks and those sorts of things. We're talking about a fairly standard construction activity. But again, that can be managed through an appropriate construction traffic management plan if need be. So I don't see these as showstoppers. I do understand council's concerns with the road construction, and I haven't been privy to a lot of the information on the land slips, for example. But these are issues that the road authority does need to deal with, and they need to understand the risks for normal traffic as well as any proposed development such as this. So They're all things that need to be weighed in very carefully. And, it's the management and the operation of the road itself in light of the traffic that's using it. I don't believe the traffic generation from this development triggers any capacity issues at all. In fact, I don't think you'd really notice it from an hour-to-hour operation, except there'd be a van going back or forth in any given hour. So I think that's all I need to say. I'm perfectly happy to answer any questions from the elected members if need be.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Emily, did you have anything in response to that, in particular in relation to the pedestrians or the capacity of the road and the current, I guess, what council has done in recent times to improve that road based on the usage that we know exists?
Yeah, so council over the last few years has spent a reasonable amount of money on the road at one of the slip locations where the Veolia garbage truck went down the side, and we're monitoring the other location that around that 500, 550 location, and we've put up signage and guideposts at this point in time, and we've also done quite a bit of maintenance work on there. I suppose the discretionary criteria is that is this development appropriate for a rural location, having regard to the capacity of the local road network. Now, I've never said it's at capacity. It's just, is this development appropriate for this location to be able to accommodate the traffic generated along that road?
Thank you. Any further questions from Planning Authority members? We do have the applicant with us, Mr. McAlpine. Mr. McAlpine, would you like to address the authority? Please come forward.
Good afternoon, members of the Glenorchy City Council Planning Authority. My name is James McAlpine and I'm here as the applicant for the proposed spa and sauna in Collinsvale. Myself, alongside my partner Liz, who is absent due to work commitments, will be the owner-operators of what is to be a family business. As set out in our submission, this is a small project proposed to be built on our property and managed by the two of us. As you have seen, we have received overwhelming support for this project from local residents along Ferry Glen Road, as evidenced by numerous letters of support. To date, we have not yet received any opposition from our local community, hence this project has truly rallied our community behind a shared vision for a brighter future in Collinsvale. Our experienced traffic engineer has designed a comprehensive plan to address any concerns regarding the traffic impact on Ferry Glen Road. By implementing measures such as a shuttle bus, operating during off-peak hours and utilising longer booking times, we are confident in our ability to minimise disruption to the local road network and perceived risks to customers and residents alike. Moreover, there is precedence that Glenorchy City Council have approved a discretionary planning permit with increased road traffic on Ferry Glen Road. In May 2023, our neighbours operating as Eden Whisky were approved to have an increase of visitors to their property to attend whisky tastings and purchase whisky from the premises, as well as commercial delivery vehicles. The approved permit allows an increase in road traffic of 2 to 7 trips per day, not including the delivery vehicles. In this application, no traffic assessments were required and no concerns were raised by Glenorchy City Council relating to the capacity of the local road network. The application was approved without any traffic-related conditions being imposed on the applicant. To elaborate on this venture, our small development offers far-reaching benefits to Collinsvale and its residents and aligns seamlessly with the vision and strategic plan of Glenorchy City Council, which was addressed in our representations. Situated in the heart of an incredibly beautiful yet underutilised area, our spa and sauna will serve as a beacon of opportunity and growth for the entirety of Collinsvale and by extension Glenorchy City Council. It will invigorate the local economy, create job opportunities and boost tourism revenue in the area. It could even encourage the local shop and cafe and other businesses to reopen in the area, particularly if there are more travellers in the area. Therefore, this small, sustainable business will aim to showcase the beauty and charm of our area in a low-impact way while supporting those around us. We want to create a relaxing space for all to come and enjoy, soaking in the mountain valley views and bubbling creeks. Imagining residents and visitors alike coming together to unwind, relax and forge lasting connections in this rejuvenating space. This is more than just a development. It's a catalyst for community growth, sustainable development, health and wellbeing. I want to express my sincere gratitude for your time and the time and effort that the planning team has put into assessing our application. I believe that the approval of our development will not only benefit Collinsvale but also serve as a testament to the Glenorchy City Council Planning Authority in fostering positive change and supporting small startup businesses in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McAlpine. Patrick has his hand up before I throw back to you, Emily. Patrick, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just quickly, I think, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, I think Emily's done a good job summing it up. I just thought we'd add, we have met a number of times with Mr. McAlpine and a couple of times with Keith as well through the development of this application. And we've been pretty clear from the outset what we thought would be required for this development, and that we didn't think it should be on council to be installing passing bays to make a development like this sustainable in the long term. My advice to Mr. McAlpine was he bought that property knowing what the condition of Ferry Glen Road was like at the time. It's a discretionary use. The road is suitable for residential use, but in our eyes, probably not for commercial development. This is probably one of the worst rural roads that we have to manage. We've got 15 kilometres of unsealed roads. This one's right up there, and we've spent considerable money trying to improve it. We spent $85,000 in 21-22 repairing and widening where the Veolia truck went over the edge. And that's when the load limit and signage went in at the time, and the garbage is no longer collected along that road and is collected on the frontage. We always monitor that road, particularly in winter. If you go up there today, it probably looks pretty good. It's nice and dry. In winter, it becomes very wet, very boggy because of the amount of trees, very little sunlight gets on that road. It becomes quite slippery. So I guess as the asset owner who has to live with the risk on that road, any increase in traffic on that road, I'm not comfortable with. So I just thought I'd add that.
Thank you, Patrick. To that point, may I just ask, so in terms of obviously our council officer advice, the point I was making before versus an independent traffic impact assessment, who at the end of the day is ultimately responsible should a minibus slip off the side of the road and it be found that the road wasn't suitable for a minibus, or that I assume their liability doesn't rest with the independent traffic assessment company, and it rests with us as council. That's right.
It's a council road, so the risk lies with us.
Yeah, thank you. Alderman Youngson?
Another question, if I may. Just regarding, and I don't know if I can comment or ask the question, but the applicant mentioned about the 2023 other development that was made, that it was whiskey tasting. So I'm assuming that that's another tourism lease that's come into the thing.
Grace, would you like to clarify that one?
Yeah, I can respond to that one. So the approval that Mr. McAlpine is talking about was for resource processing, which is actually a permitted use within the rural zone. So how the planning scheme works is that the standard that talks about the capacity of the road actually only applies to uses that are listed as discretionary. So this particular standard that the application recommended for refusal on did not apply to that permit.
Okay, that's not at the discretion of council officers,
no.
Sorry, that's because of the planning scheme requirements. But just to clarify, Mr. McAlpine mentioned that it was approved for visitors to the property with 7 traffic movements a day for visitors. Was that part of the application?
It was approved for resource processing for a distillery. That's what it was approved for, and there is conditions on that permit that relate to the amount of traffic, amount of car parking spaces as well.
So resource processing doesn't suggest a cellar door, tourism or retail?
It's not, no, it's approved as resource processing. Sometimes it can be considered as subservient and directly associated tastings, but my knowledge of it is that it is only approved as resource processing.
Thank you. Alderman King.
I was going to ask the same thing, is tasting's approved or not, because Mr McCallum's given a really good representation of what he wants to do, and I applaud you for what you want to do, but I want to understand if that other commercial business has the right to do what is suggested. Not suggesting he's told any mistruths or anything, but there can be some confusion around what actually is under the approval that it had.
Even if it was approved as the tastings, again, it was not an applicable standard, so we couldn't have considered the capacity of the road approval, like we can consider under this one. So, yeah, even if it was approved to have some tastings, we wouldn't have been able to, we wouldn't be able to consider the capacity. So it wasn't an applicable standard.
Isn't the use then tourism though? Or are you saying that's not?
It was classified as resource processing, so the predominant use was for the distillery.
So it shouldn't be allowed to have tastings, in other words. Is that what we're saying? Or
I don't know enough about that particular one to comment on that.
from a commercial perspective, I mean, you could have your friends go up and have a taste, but that's, yeah, where do you draw the line? Yeah.
Can we get to
So we think the development is fantastic.
No, hang on, we're not at that point yet, sorry, to be talking to. Just if you have any questions. Sorry, did you have a question? Councillor Quick?
I also have a question of the applicant. So you talked about residents of the Collinsville area wanting to come up and access and use the facility. So would you have an arrangement to pick them up further down the road, or again, the temptation for them to drive to that would be certainly something that I'd be thinking about and a concern. So how do you intend to address that?
Sure. So when I'm representing residents, there's obviously the residents that are along the road, most of them within walking distance. So it'd be open to them, obviously, but speaking to the control of cars coming up, anyone that's not brought up on a shuttle bus wouldn't be allowed to access the spa sauna, verbatim. So it's a public road, they can come up, but they can't access our facilities.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Quick, did you have a question?
No, she's right.
We want to sum up.
Any further questions? No. Okay, well, we do have a recommendation that the application for the spa and sauna tourist operation with associated infrastructure of 134 and 146 Ferry Glen Road, Collinsville be refused for the following reasons. 1, the application fails to demonstrate compliance with the performance criteria in clause 20.3.1 P4, as the capacity of the local road network cannot accommodate the traffic generated by the use. Do I have someone to move that recommendation as a motion? Moved Alderman King. Someone to second? Alderman Dunsby? Alderman King.
Yeah, this is a very difficult and almost confusing when we've got conflicting advice. And I applaud you for what you want to do there, and I hope we can find a way to make this happen, because we are progressive, we do want things to happen, but I'm concerned about the advice we've been given from our own planners and advisors, and as far as around the passing bays, etc. If it's a case of 1 or 2 passing bays overcomes the problem, but we understand we don't know the cost of that, so we're not going to talk about that, but that is something that would not be a council expense. We're not expecting council to, based on advice we've got from our manager, we've already spent a significant amount on a single rural road, and we've got to spread our funds across numerous roads. So you don't know how much I want this to go ahead, but it's very conflicting, which is why I've moved this so we can discuss it.
Thank you, Alderman King. Further discussion? Alderman Yaxley.
Thank you, Mayor. Echoing Alderman King's comments in terms of the conflict that we have. It's, for mine, there is one element that's the major issue, is the turning circle in that first 500 metres. The rest seems to be answered, in my opinion, fully. The amount of traffic that goes up and down, and for there to be an incident where one can't get through. It seems to be extremely low. And operating at off-peak times. So I will be voting against the recommendation because I feel that there's enough evidence for it to be approved.
Thank you, Alderman Yaxley. Further discussion? Alderman Dunstan.
Yeah, the issue of the actual road that came to us after an accident and it caused a small landslip, and so the road does have some concerns for me. I'm just, and some of that came about as an inexperienced and not familiar with the road, so I'm just concerned with anybody going up there. Should it not be a regular driver or something like that, that we could potentially see that happen again, and that risk sits very highly with me. I feel I have to support the recommendation to refuse based on the information that's been put before me this evening, mainly around that. But I do commend you on the project. I think it's fantastic. It's just disappointing that this road doesn't accommodate you so easily for this to happen. I'm not sure if we can find a way around it, but I hope that we can nut something out. I'm not sure what that might be.
Thank you. Anything from you, Councillor Quick?
I'll keep my cards close to my chest.
Fair enough. I too will speak to the motion, and I, like my fellow planning authority members, I'm a little bit conflicted on this one. With my open for business hat, with every part of my heart, want to support this application and appreciate the effort and the cost that goes into actually proposing a really courageous development like this. We are open for business in Glenorchy. We want to see innovative business ideas brought to us, and Collinsvale absolutely is, as you say, a hidden gem. Well, they're my words, but as you say, very amazing space and open to this sort of development. If we were a council that was flushed with cash and/or thought it was reasonable to levy our ratepayers for significant upgrades to low service roads, then perhaps we could see it fit to invest in upgrades that are needed to be able to support this kind of development. But the reality is, at this point in time, we're not that council. We're not flush with cash. We can't put that burden on our ratepayers. And I see the concerns. For me, if there is any doubt in terms of safety, that's enough for me to say I can't be sitting here saying I approved a development where a bus has gone down a bank and people have been injured or potentially worse. And where you have conflicting advice, for me, I can't be comfortable with that, and particularly where, and I'm not alleging anything untoward here, but the reality of the way development applications and assessment works is that independent assessments are funded by development proponents, and I see issue with that, and I think there perhaps needs to be change in the way things are done so that that's not the case. But I need to trust the advice of our staff here at council, who have our interests first and foremost at front of mind. And to hear Patrick say he would not be comfortable with any further traffic on that particular road at all, given with the current state of the road, satisfied that council has done enough to be able to assure the safety of that road for the current residential use by residents in that area. But I can't bear the thought of any, as much as I want to support the proposed development, I just can't take that risk on myself, because it is us. It's not even council officers who are liable at the end of the day. It is us as elected members, with the hats that we wear as planning authority members and elected members more broadly. So really sadly, because I love this proposal, I think it's amazing, and again I commend you for what you've done and acknowledge the effort and the cost that's gone into it. I'd love to see somehow that we are able to work with you on a revised application down the track. I don't know what that's going to take, given the difficulty in actually constructing passing bays in the steep embankment that the road presents. It was constructed as a horse and carriage cart back in the day, and it is a difficult topography. So it's with a heavy heart that I will support the recommendation, and I appreciate the effort that's gone in both from the developer, external providers, and also our council officers as well. No further discussion. I'll go back to the mover, who was Alderman King, to close debate.
Thank you. Again, I applaud you for this. I think we all do. The fact is, I don't think I felt as much conflict. If I sat here too much longer, I could change my mind. So we have to keep working on this. I respect our staff. I've disagreed with them before. And it's rare that we do that because other qualified people, we're not, we were elected. We're not qualified. We're not the elected. We're elected to do a job and we do the best we can with this. And I hope you can sit down with our staff and find a way past this, that we can make this work, because we truly are open for business and we truly do want things to go forward. But I have to accept, in this case, our staff's advice due to potential liability, and if there's a way of progressing this, then let's find it. Let's find it. Because I think you're a terrific young fellow, and what you and your partner are trying to do, go for it. Go for it.
Thank you, Alderman King. I'll put the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand if you are for. That's Alderman Dunsby, Alderman King and Mayor Thomas. Please raise your hand if you're against. That is Alderman Yaxley and Councillor Quick, and the motion is carried 3-2. Would you like to explain the process from here? Thank you, Grace.
Yep, so the application has been decided by the Planning Authority. The decision is to refuse the application. The applicant and the representatives will be notified of the decision, and the applicant will then have 14 days to appeal the decision to the tribunal.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McAlpine. Thank you, Mr. Midson. Item 6, proposed use and development, multiple dwellings, 1 existing and 11 new, demolition and consolidation of 3 titles, 72, 74 and 76 Grove Road, Glenorchy. And again, Sylvia is our planning officer to present this one. Thank you, Sylvia. Again, we have read your report, so if there's anything you'd like to highlight for us, please feel free to do that.
Be very quick. So this is the site. So it's proposed to join the 3 properties there, to demolish 2 houses and keep 1 of them, and some of the other buildings. You can see the neighbours, there's the industrial use at the bottom, there's a warehouse. And then there is 2 units on one side and a house on the other one. We have received the representation from the units on the right-hand side, which there were, well, we'll go through the other slides first. So this is the site. So it's the house with the green roof, with the brown one, and with the red roof, basically. That's from the road. Yeah, okay, next slide. And this is just looking the other way. So yeah, and this shows the unit that's next door that has raised the concern with overshadowing. So the units are double-story. And, well, maybe I still should go through the other slides first, though. So, this is the proposed site plan. The units are double-story. There's a row on either side, and one of the existing one of the houses is going to be retained. Driveway in the middle, and we see the car parking spaces between the units. Next slide. Just go. That shows the elevation. There's a very small discretion in terms of the building envelope. And so it was considered that that would not adversely impact on anyone. Also, all the shadows from that discretion will be falling on the actual property where the units are, as opposed to the neighbouring properties. Next one. Again, that also shows the elevations from the other side. At the bottom, you can see what the proposal would look like from the street, where there's the existing house in front, and then there's 2 rows of units. The next slide, please. These are just all the discretions. Like I said, the main one I'm going to talk about is just the setback, because representations was raised against that. Private open space is considered acceptable because it's only just the width of the private outdoor space that's short in some areas, but the overall provision of private outdoor space is acceptable. Motorcycle parking numbers were considered acceptable because there's garages and visitor parking spaces where they can be accommodated. Pedestrian access, there's no pedestrian access over the shared access, but because of the size of the development, it was considered acceptable. Traffic generation as well was considered acceptable. Grove Road can cope with the amount of additional traffic. That was also raised in the representation. Sensitive use within a attenuation area, the subject site is within 500 metres of a processing facility, and so noise had to be addressed. So noise and dust assessment was submitted, which was found to be acceptable. Then the areas within a flood-prone hazard area, again, our hydrologist had a look at that and is satisfied that the proposal can address the performance criteria. The one thing with the land is there used to be a scrapyard previously, historically on the site. So the site was left with site contamination. So they have put in a report in regards to that, but there are conditions recommended to clean up the site, and they potentially expensive conditions. So I thought I'll be raising that. So now we probably just go to that. Yeah, that was the setback of the building envelopes, which I said that just very minor. So I think we can move on from that. The next one is the private open space. It's just the width is marginally shorter than what it's supposed to be, but there's enough usable private outdoor space, so that's acceptable. The next one, motorcycle parking area. Just talked about that. I think we'll just go next one. Sensitive use within attenuation area, that is the one in purple. That's the wood processing facility. That's within 500 metres, but that discretion is acceptable. Next one, this is flood-prone hazard area. Again, that has been assessed and found to be acceptable. Next one, potentially contaminated land. That just shows what it used to look like when it was a scrapyard. Well, basically just full of cars really, which were dismantled. Next one, so here we get to the representation. So overshadowing of the solar panels of the property next door was raised, and loss of privacy with the proposed development. In terms of the overshadowing of the solar panels in that corner where the representative was concerned about it, the application actually complies with the required setback, although it still has to address the performance criteria. But if something would otherwise comply, we would still think that would be acceptable because it's not substantially different from what it's supposed to be. So we think that will be acceptable. With the loss of privacy, it does comply. They have to have windows 3 metres away from the boundary, which they do have, so it complies. Demolition of all the homes. The homes are not heritage listed, so there's no provisions in the planning scheme that would deal with that other than the heritage listing. In terms of crossovers, concern were raised about the crossovers. It's actually going to be a reduction in a crossover because at the moment there's 3 properties and they each have a crossover. And so when these 3 properties get joined, there will be a crossover for the existing house, and there will be the crossover for where the new shared driveway is. So again, that was considered acceptable. Insufficient visitor parking. The proposal complies with the amount of visitor parking that's being provided. And the last one is traffic volumes. Yes, Grove Road is a busy road, but we have referred it to Emily, and she found that the traffic volumes were acceptable from this proposal, that Grove Road could accommodate the amount of traffic that's being generated. So overall, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Sylvia. Any questions for Sylvia? Councillor Quick.
I think it's terrific that we're returning to residential. I mean, if you go down Grove Road, it's a real dog's breakfast, you know, starting at the service station and working your way back around to Elric Road. I mean, there's just about every conceivable form of industry, and, you know, it's tired, it's in need of renewal, and I think this will be one of the first steps into perhaps other developers thinking that, you know, there are places in Glenorchy where you can actually have not high density, but, you know, better density use of land. I mean, the houses around that area, you know, and also on Elric Road are really deep, ready for development. And as I say, currently it's a dog's breakfast. When it comes to volume of traffic, I mean, it's a real through road, because Elwick Road and the main road now is absolutely hopeless at peak hour time. So everybody's diverting around Grove Road and coming out of the school. So I compliment everybody, and I know that there are conditions subject to this, but I look forward to seeing, you know, the removal of what's there and people flocking back into Grove Road. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Quick.
Moving the order.
Is that right, that the traffic, that is a flow-through road? That's right, isn't it? And the traffic can be accommodated on the road?
Yeah.
Alderman Yaxley.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question regarding the traffic assessment. Dare I ask? I just wondered, it's obviously on that bend. It's obviously a significant bend, especially if you're coming out and then going right. Did the assessment mention that, or was that a problem, or do you see that as an issue? Or
The sight lines were looked at.
Yep.
Coming out there, and there's adequate sight lines
Yep.
to get out.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. And I just got a question around the flooding, the flood map and the risk there. Up the road a little bit, there was a development that was H3 level, and I just wanted to just double check, because I couldn't see that in the report or on the mapping, whether what the risk was for that site.
Flooding. Yes, there was a table in there under the hydrologist report. Let me
I must have missed it.
Sorry. Thank you, Dan. Do you have a comment in relation to the flood mapping on this site?
Yes, yeah, it is H1, or what we categorize as low risk prior to the development, and the flood report also assessed that it is H1, it remains H1 post development as well.
H1.
So essentially the low risk.
Yep. Okay. And just on that development map after it goes on, it doesn't appear like there's any flooding on that area at all. It just looks like the site's been put on. So I wasn't sure whether it's because the drainage has increased around that.
Do you have an answer for that one, Dan?
No, well, the development hasn't proposed any changes to the terrain. It's just the existing scenario. I think it's just to do with the topography of this area. And major overland flows seem to follow to the west of the development. So the only recommendation I think there was in terms of the flow heights, which automatically, like even if it's a low risk, you have to then raise your flow heights by 300 millimeters just as a building regulatory requirement. But other than that, there's no physical changes to the land at all.
So thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Yaxley. Any further questions? No, well, we have a recommendation that a permit be granted for the proposed use and development of 72, 74 and 76 Grove Road, Glenorchy, subject to the 18 conditions outlined in our papers. We'll have someone to move this. Moved, Councillor Quick, seconded Alderman Dunsby. Councillor Quick, do you have anything further to add?
No, I do not.
Excellent. Any further discussion? Alderman Dunsby.
Yes, I'd just like to comment, this is a good an example of infill happening within our community and creating some homes that are going to, be there, be central and be what we like to see happening, good use of the land. So I commend the project and look forward to it happening.
Absolutely. Any further discussion? I just hear to that. I think this is exactly why we created it, is in a residential zone, and pleased to see it being used for more housing to be able to and ensure everyone has a home. So I'm happy to support the recommendation and thank everyone for their efforts.
Dare I say that we ought, that the education department know that they ought to consider more young people possibly moving into these areas, and the schools need to be considered. That's all. It's not nothing to do with this planning, but
Okay,
I'm sorry,
that's all right.
I
You're
just
entitled to your view.
I just think of my grandfather donated the land to primary school, and I just thought it was, the school's close by, but
Okay, anything to close debate, councillor Quick?
No?
No, I'll put the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand if you are for. That's carried unanimously. Grace, would you like to explain the process from here?
Yes, so the application has been decided by the planning authority. The decision is to approve the application. The applicant and the representative will be notified of the decision and will have 14 days to appeal the decision to the tribunal. The use and development is not to commence until the end of the 14-day period.
Okay, thank you, Grace. Thank you, everybody. That brings our Planning Authority on Monday, 18th of March 2024 meeting to a close at 4:55 p.m. Thank you, everyone who has come along and watched online. Stay safe. Our council meeting next Monday, 3:30 p.m. We'll see you then.